Hey, welcome in everybody. I am Tyler Pyburn and welcome into The Future is Electric with CLF, the Conservation Law Foundation. Today, I really welcome you into just a fantastic and special program all about the future of clean energy. Now, if you're concerned about the dangers of fossil fuels and damage to our climate, or wondering if or when it's even possible to kind of break our addiction to them as a whole, well, really, today's show is for you, and it really is just a fantastic one for you because we have a panel of experts, with us here today, all virtually, to help kind of visualize the future of clean energy happening right now in our work, in your town, and in your kitchen. I might be doing a little foreshadowing right there. I certainly am. Now, before we get started, I really want to remind all of you that are watching right now that yes, it's a panel discussion, but we also want to hear from you. You can participate, and we want you to be a part of the conversation. And you can do that by jumping in the chat box that is directly next to the video player itself. Type your questions in. We're going to be taking those a little bit later on in the show, but we love to hear your thoughts, comments, concerns. How are you, turning the page and going electric, right? That's what we want to hear all about today. Now, before we kind of get to the panel discussion, there's a few housekeeping notes I want to remind you of, and that is make sure you're following us on all of your social media platforms. So you could do that obviously on Instagram at Conservation Law Foundation, on Twitter at CLF, Facebook at the CLF, and of course, keep checking our YouTube channel as well and all over the place to make sure that you're seeing all of our wonderful content and signing up for our newsletter. Now, if you are having any technical issues or difficulties whatsoever throughout the course of the show, if you can't hear, you're having trouble logging on, it's all right. We've got the person to reach out to. So you can go ahead and reach out to Kate Bibeau, KBIBEAU at CLF.org. Kate will answer all your questions. She is absolutely fantastic. She's here for you to help you out throughout the entire process. Speaking of things that are fantastic, let's get to the show. And my fantastic co-host, we have to welcome in Risha Narayanan for the show to kick off. So Risha, I turn it over to you, my friend.
Thank you, Tyler, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We have got a jam-packed show, and we're going to talk a lot about many, many interesting, fascinating things, like why we don't actually need fossil fuels and what does our electric future look like. So we're going to talk everything wrong with the messaging we've heard from big oil and gas this winter. We're going to talk success stories because clean energy is not just a future possibility, it's a current opportunity. And finally, if you stay tuned till the end, we are going to have a delicious cooking demo featuring yours truly. I'm joined by some fantastic advocates today. We have Greg Cunningham, the Vice President and Director of our Clean Energy and Climate Change Program. We have Emily Green, a Senior Attorney in our Clean Energy and Climate Change Program. And we've got a very, very special guest, Jackson Kaspari, the Resilience Coordinator and Assistant City Planner for Dover, New Hampshire. But who better to kick off this electric show than Greg Cunningham himself? Greg, thank you so much for joining us today.
Risha, it's great to be here.
All right, Greg. Well, let's talk big oil and big gas, and let's talk this winter. What's so wrong about what we've heard from the fossil fuel industry this winter, and why?
Well, I guess the biggest problem is it's a lot of fake news and half-truths. I mean, we've heard that on the coldest days of our winter, that we won't have enough gas to heat our homes or to provide electricity to them. And they claim that as a result of that, we may face rolling blackouts. That is, our power will be either reduced or eliminated altogether for short periods of time, which could be really problematic, and it's scary. And so that's why it's part of their messaging. Yeah, they've even gone so far as to compare those risks to what happened to Texas last winter in that horrible storm that resulted in power lines down, power plants shut down, and lots of people suffering as a result. And the solution that big gas and oil proposes for these purported crises is more fossil fuels. Now, of course, they're saying we avoid severe weather with more fossil fuels, but it's those fossil fuels that are helping to drive climate change, which worsens severe weather. So their logic is really skewed. We compare it to a kind of having the circularity of a Texas two-step. So all this fear mongering, it just isn't true. And in this region, we've contracted for substantially more power than we need in a given winter, in some instances as much as 30% more. And we've got a system of incentives and penalties so that if power generators don't show up, they get whacked, or they get rewarded if they do. And so as a result of the system we have in place, we've never had one of these rolling blackouts. So the constant input of fear and trying to sway us with our emotions rather than reason is just, it's really distressing and out of line. I would add this analogy to Texas. New England, obviously, we have severe weather, cold weather every winter, and we've prepared our system for that. And we have backup supplies. We are not at risk of the kinds of problems that Texas suffered under. So why are we hearing all this, you might ask? I mean, it's really a desperate act by an industry that is seeing the writing on the wall, which is 5 of our 6 New England states have climate laws that are calling for us to clean up our electric grid and to use electricity to power our vehicles and to heat our homes. And so that is a real threat to their business model. And they're going to fight, and they're going to try to convince us using half-truths to take a different direction. Unfortunately, that direction doesn't have our interests in mind. It's all about more money in the wallets of gas and oil.
That's really fascinating that, we're seeing these industries with their backs up against these walls, distributing all of this false information, this fear mongering. But Greg, I'm curious, we know that this is wrong. This is just not true, this information. But why does this message permeate everything? I feel like I've read multiple news articles with this fear mongering of rolling blackouts just this winter alone. Why are we seeing this?
It's in large part because they're reiterating a message that's coming from a seemingly legitimate source, which is ISO New England. Now, ISO New England is our regional grid operator. They are responsible for both managing that grid and managing the power that runs across it. So they decide which kind of power producer operates at any given moment. They're a really important entity, as you might imagine. They keep our lights on, and that's critical to all of us. But the problem is they are only and solely focused on keeping the lights on. They are not concerned about climate change. They're not concerned about our well-being as a result of the impacts of climate change, let alone that 5 of our 6 states have laws that are demanding cleaner energy on our grid, increasingly cleaner energy on our grid. And so ISO New England takes the position that it's just not its responsibility. And not only that, not only are they passively refusing to act to address climate change, but they've actively lobbied for gas pipelines into this region. They are actively part of the problem. And they do this. All of their actions and activities are undertaken under this cloud of secrecy and this lack of transparency. So there's not public access to what it is that they do. There's not public access to many of their justifications. And it leaves many of us in the dark.
It's kind of terrifying that there's this wizard behind the curtains kind of controlling everything about our energy. And as someone who rents, hearing this, especially as someone who, doesn't have control over my living space the way a homeowner does or a property owner does, what can we do to make change with all of this?
So that's when we refer to what's known as systems level change. And there are a couple of systems I'm referring to here. The primary one is our system of laws, regulations. and policies. The other is our electric system and how we manage it and what power we allow to flow through it. Now, I alluded to all of our states in New England but one having these mandatory climate laws on the books. These are designed to reduce our emissions, our carbon emissions on an annual basis, and to meet the scientifically necessitated and designed and dictated limits that we have to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. So our states have these laws on the books. They're all relatively recent, and they're now in the process of implementing them. And what we need is for our policymakers to hear from us, our lawmakers to hear from us, our governors to hear from us, and for them to be reinforced by our advice and our encouragement to act on climate. And that includes urging ISO New England, urging our states to urge ISO New England to do the right thing by climate and to make climate part of its mission and part of its obligations. So it's important that each of us do what we can individually on climate. I'd like to think that we've all got that in the back of our minds, that those big and little things that we can do. But this is bigger. This is about the collective. This is about the systems as a whole, and changing those and making really sweeping change in our states and communities around mitigating climate. So bear in mind, CLF is, we are a fortunate organization in that we have access to various of these sorts of back rooms and these conversations among regulators and in some regard, people that talk to ISO New England. So we're there, we're making the arguments, and we'd love to work with you to help raise your voice and elevate your thinking and your ideas and solutions. So working with CLF is another great way to act on climate.
That's really great to hear that, even though I can't in my current living situation install a heat pump or, buy an electric stove, that my voice still really matters. And I'm glad you mentioned CLF's work, because one of the questions I wanted to ask you is what exactly is CLF doing, right? There are places, like you said, that my voice can't reach. So what is CLF doing to amplify my voice and the voice of our audience, of our supporters, of our New England residents in those areas we can't reach?
So first and foremost, we make great efforts to work with our communities, and particularly the communities that have the least access to these kinds of regulatory spheres, and those that are the most burdened and frankly the least represented. And we elevate those voices whenever and wherever we can. All of our New England states have already urged ISO New England to take some of these measures, to change the way they do things, to make climate part of their mission. And ISO New England continues, in spite of very direct pressure already, not quite enough, but pressure already, has not acted. And we're continuing to beat that drum, to put that pressure on, to talk through our media, social media, and newspapers and radio and television, to get the message out there as to what needs to be done and what we as individuals and society can do. So we're active at the legislature, we're active at our agencies, and we're active in our communities, getting the word out.
Great. And I love hearing that change is possible and that success is possible, Greg. And now I want to explore a little bit more about success and change. So Greg, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your words so much. Of course. Now let's switch gears and dig into success a little bit more. We're going to check in with Jackson Kaspari, the Resilience Coordinator and Assistant City Planner of Dover, New Hampshire, and Emily Green, our Senior Advocate in the Clean Energy and Climate Change Program. Emily, take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much, Risha, and thank you so much, Jackson, for being here with us this evening. I am thrilled to be doing this segment of the program with you, Jackson, because we're going to be focusing on success and solutions. So let's get right to it. First of all, I understand that you are a resilience coordinator and assistant city planner. Sounds like you wear a lot of hats. What is it that you do exactly?
Well, first off, I just want to say thank you so much, Emily, for having me on the show, and thank you, CLF, in general. Really excited to be a part of this opportunity. So, as a resilience coordinator for the city of Dover, you're right. I do a lot of things for the city. Resilience is a really broad category, but mainly what I do is try to help citizens implement their goals and how they want to see their community grow in terms of resilience. So, I work actively with the city's Energy Commission, Conservation Commission, and Open Lands Committee. So that means I deal with topics ranging from land conservation and composting all the way to implementing energy programs, expanding solar, and electrifying the city's municipal fleet. So there's really a lot that I do. And I'm really working on implementing a resilience master plan chapter, which will lay out a lot of targets and explore some of these topics in greater depth than I'll be able to go into today.
That's great. What an array of topics that you are covering. And it sounds like there are just so many opportunities for you to make a meaningful impact at the local level. So I understand that you are working on climate change. You mentioned some work on renewable energy. You talked about greenhouse gas emissions. What is the city of Dover doing to tackle climate change? Can you talk a little bit more about that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. The city of Dover has really done quite a lot to become a more resilient community and address issues associated with climate change. Um, Recently, we've completed with the work with the Climate Forum Planning Committee to produce a path to resilience. And that path to resilience acts as a timeline that documents activities that the city's engaged with over the past 10 years or so to help address and become a more resilient community. And that is available through our Resilient Dover webpage, which is an awesome resource for folks to check out what we've been doing here in Dover. Another thing that we've completed recently through the work, again, the Climate Forum Planning Committee, was to identify a list of climate resources that are really integral to implementing our Resilience Master Plan chapter. So that was an awesome project that put all of our various climate documents that the city had into one easily accessible place. And we're also producing fact sheets as part of that as well to make that information a little bit more digestible to the general public, which is great. Two of the projects that I'm really excited about that we've completed are some large solar array installations, one being on the Dover High School. That array produces over 1 million kilowatt hours of clean electricity each year, which is about the equivalent to what 88 average US homes use annually. And that's offsetting 558 tons of carbon, which is really excellent. Another smaller solar installation that was a really cool project was at the indoor pool and children's museum. And that was a great collaboration with Revision Energy, where they actually donated 103 of the 318 solar panels. And that project is expected to save Dover taxpayers over $500,000 by the end of its lifetime. And the high school project will actually end up saving Dover taxpayers over $4.1 million at the end of its 40-year lifetime. So while reducing our greenhouse gas emissions and helping the environment, we're also saving people money. So it's really a win-win.
That is fantastic, Jackson. And I'm really glad you ended on that point because it is so important. And as a CLF advocate, I can tell you that it is often the case that climate solutions actually save consumers money. And we are often pushing for climate solutions that are also health solutions, that are also community solutions, and that are also consumer solutions. And I just want to turn back to those solar arrays because those photos were really impressive. That's a gigantic high school, I have to say. So clearly, installation of solar panels is not just taking place at the individual homeowner level or at the individual business owner level. It's taking place at the town level on municipal buildings. Can you talk about what is the importance of that happening at the community level and what is the impact of community action like that?
Well, I think it really serves a couple purposes, right? It's helping community at large by lowering the energy costs for the municipality. It's also serving as an educational tool in terms of the solar arrays. I mean, having a solar array on the Children's Museum is great. We're teaching kids about the power of clean energy when they visit the Children's Museum of New Hampshire. And the high school students have easy access to a display panel within the high school where they can learn about all of the great benefits from having such a large array that produces about 40% of the requirement of the electricity in that building. So that's awesome. I mean, community action and engagement really is at the heart and drives the core of the changes that we've seen in Dover, all of which have been really positive. And a lot of times these are sparked through conversations between commission and committee members. And that's one of my favorite parts of my role here in Dover. I get to work with these active groups of engaged citizens who come from a variety of backgrounds and all have really important and influential ideas. And my role is to really help them implement those ideas, work with other city stakeholders to get things done.
Well, I got to tell you, as the mom of a 1-year-old who is currently screaming downstairs, it is so exciting to think of today's children growing up in solar-powered schools and with solar panels on the museums. It's just really awesome. And it's also really great to hear a real-world example of what can be accomplished locally when community members come together and work together to tackle a problem. And I just want to allude back to something Greg mentioned earlier, which is that one of the things that we do as CLF advocates is we recognize that oftentimes it is community members who have the expertise in what are the problems facing their communities, and they have the insight into what are the appropriate solutions. And so sometimes it's our role, and it sounds like it's sometimes your role too, Jackson, to provide and to push for the processes to enable those voices to be elevated and really heard. So I want to stay positive in the face of way too much doom and gloom climate messaging in the media these days, which we know can really be counterproductive. So let's talk some more about the power of community action to tackle a global problem like the climate crisis. Jackson, how does that work?
Well, community level initiatives really send a message to surrounding communities. And we have some really good examples of that here in Dover. To be honest, in New Hampshire, we're sort of fighting an uphill battle with missing some enacting state legislation. So it's really communities that are driving the core of change that we're hoping to see on a statewide level. A couple examples would be the carbon and nitrogen footprint report that I helped produce as a fellow for Dover a few years ago. And that was really the first of its kind. Before then, no other municipality in North America had actually quantified its nitrogen impact on the environment. So that report has served as a template for other local government organizations to follow, and we've received some really positive feedback from that. Another example would be an update to the city's site review regulations promoting electric vehicle charging infrastructure. I've had multiple conversations with surrounding town planners in my 6 months here with the city of Dover who are using what we've done with those site regulations and those amendments to make changes in their own communities.
I love what you're talking about, Dover serving as a template for other municipalities in the region. And I got to tell you, the very same principle applies at the state level. And so we are often pushing for robust, strong climate policy in one state with the idea that it will serve as a replicable model in other states in the region. So when a city like Dover acts, or when a small state like Rhode Island or a small population state like Maine does something robust on climate, that action really has impacts that ripple outside of just that municipality or that state's borders. And I think that's really important for countering the mentality of, well, what can I do, or what can just one state do? So really important point, and I'm glad you raised that. Now, I have a feeling that some of the folks watching right now are feeling pretty inspired by all the awesome things that you have going on in Dover. So what can you tell them if they want to bring back some of the ideas that you're talking about back to their community? What advice do you have for them?
Well, elected officials represent their constituents, so that means you. And it's really critical to contact your elected officials if you have a good idea and you want to spark change in your own community. So talk to them, tell them why you care. You can attend public meetings and make sure your voice is heard at a state level and at a local level. When someone from the community me and says, hey, look, I want to get this done, I'm either going to help them directly or I'm going to find someone in the organization that can provide them assistance. So your voice does have power. We're here to serve you. That's our entire role. So seriously, get out there and make a difference, make your voice heard. And I highly recommend, if you don't have a committee or commission in your town dedicated to sustainability or energy or climate, you have the power to create one. And bringing together a group of community members can make a really positive impact. We've certainly seen that in Dover and other communities throughout the state.
Thanks so much, Jackson. Definitely seems like a running theme through this evening's program that your voice matters. And I would say that that's the case not only at the local level, but certainly at the state level and even at the federal level. Contact your elected officials. As Jackson said, that's their job. They represent you. So we encourage you to do that. And shameless plug coming your way. If you don't know who to contact about what issues, organizations like CLF can apprise you of key opportunities when the moment is right. So with that, I just want to thank you again, Jackson. This was super informative and really just optimistic and hopeful. So thank you again so much for your time this evening.
Yeah, thank you very much, Emily.
Thank you. So we have talked a little bit about alternatives to fossil fuel for generating electricity, solar, of course, and you've also heard a little bit about alternatives to heating your homes in the form of electricity. But there's another place that you might be burning fossil fuels in your very own home without even thinking about it, and that is in your kitchen. That's right, I am talking about your gas stove. But luckily, Rishya is here to show us that you can cook a delicious, all-electric meal and leave that indoor air pollution out of the matter. So, over to you.
Well, we are set up in CLF's kitchen here in our Boston office. I've got my induction burner. I've got a perfect pan to cook on this induction burner. And you're probably thinking, well, Rish, why are we cooking today? We're cooking today because I have always grown up smelling the aromas of my grandma's recipes. I remember sitting on the island as a child on Sunday morning, watching her cook chai on the stovetop, watching her prepare dosa and other sorts of recipes that just stick in my mind so well. And they were always on gas stoves. It was always that button you push in, you turn the knob, it's a click, 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 and the flame lights up, and the food is heated beautifully with beautiful smells. And it's really when I started working at CLF as the climate communication strategist when I realized that gas stoves aren't really that great for your health. The energy that we use to power our gas stoves runs in pipelines that slither under our homes. And when we turn on that stove, when we turn on that knob, we're releasing really bad air pollutants into our homes, into the air that we breathe, that my family breathes. And it's this same energy, this same gas that powers our stove that's also polluting our climate and warming it right now as we speak. So today I thought, well, here I am talking about climate solutions. Why don't I try cooking one of my favorite childhood recipes on an induction burner? It's all electric. It doesn't use any gas. And it's a solution that, I've never tried out. And I want to see if I can make the recipe just as well with just as much nostalgia as my grandma did on gas stoves. So join me today. We'll be making chana masala on an induction burner, and we'll see how this goes. Is it going to be the same? Is it going to be worse? Is it going to be better? We'll find out. So the first thing we need to do with this induction burner, which I bought off of Best Buy, so pretty easy, is make sure that you have the right pan. So flip your pan over and make sure that it either says induction ready or there's a little symbol on the bottom that says induction. Otherwise it will not work because there's a magnet in here that needs to magnetize to your pan in order for it to work. So I'm gonna slap this baby down And there's a lot of buttons here, so we're gonna push some buttons and see what happens. Okay. So we have our chickpeas, and it's a really, really easy recipe to follow. Essentially, you have garlic, onions, tomatoes, some water and tomato paste, and some chickpeas. All right, do you see how these little droplets are dancing on the pan? That's my pan telling me she's hot enough. So I wanna get that oil on there as quickly as I can. We're gonna pour in all our oil. Now I'm using olive oil. You can use any vegetable oil really. I just like olive oil. Take your onions. This is about half of a sweet onion. Gonna grab some garlic. This is 3 cloves of garlic. Get that in there. And now we are just gonna stir until these onions get a little bit translucent. This aroma reminds me so much of home. I have 2 dried chilies here. These are really spicy because I didn't get the right ones. Use at your own risk, but they add a little bit of a kick to the food. So you can kind of see the onions are taking a different form here. They're becoming a little more clear. They're yellowing a little bit, taking on that color of the olive oil. Keeping up with the CLF theme, I am making sure to use a stainless steel pan and not a nonstick pan. I don't want any PFAS in my food. Okay, amazing. So next step, I'm gonna add in some tomatoes. So this is around 2 or 3 tomatoes chopped up, diced up, and we're just gonna plop them right in to our onion and garlic mix. Give it a good stir. And this is when I'm gonna take my spices, which are the center of any homemade childhood Indian dish. In here, I've got about half a teaspoon of salt. I've got half a teaspoon of chopped masala. I've got a little bit of cumin, maybe about 1/4 of a teaspoon. I've got half a teaspoon of rasam powder, and I've also got a little bit of black pepper as well. So just dump that all in. These are things that, you know, you might not have in your cabinet if you don't cook Indian food a lot. But if you have an Indian grocery store nearby you, you should be able to find these spices. And as I add them in, I'm like immediately getting hit with the same smells that I get hit with at home when my grandma cooks. Now this is about half a cup of water mixed with about a tablespoon of tomato paste. I'm gonna just pour it right in. Oops, I splashed myself. Sorry, Grandma. Okay, got a can of chickpeas. I have drained them and I've rinsed them. And we are just gonna dump them in. This is the real base of chana masala, the chickpeas. We're gonna stir them in here. Make sure that all of your chickpeas are covered in this masala that you've created, that you've been cooking thus far. I think I'm gonna reduce the heat again because I don't want it boiling. I'm gonna take this lid and put it right on top. And we're gonna just let it simmer for about 3 to 5 minutes. Okay, I think we are just about done. You can see that this is reduced really nicely. But this is it. And it took us all about 15, 20 minutes to make. Really easy, really simple dish, only a couple ingredients. Okay, we're done. It's time to eat. If you're eating this kind of like the way that I eat it traditionally, you always have to have some kind of carb with it. So what I have some rice that I made in my electric Instant Pot earlier. And we are gonna serve this up with some jasmine rice. And here is our much more quickly made on an induction burner chana masala. So this actually went a lot better than I expected. I was a little bit scared when I saw all these buttons. I thought I would mess up the recipe somehow. But I think other than getting used to the heat, which took maybe 3 or 4 minutes, and the settings of it, this cooked really quickly. It was really simple, and the food looks the same as how I made it. Definitely not how my grandma made it, because I'll never be at her level. But you know, close enough. Close enough. To me, food like this, these childhood recipes, food means family to me. And I think whatever family means to you, whoever family comprises of for you, we can all agree that family is something so important to us, to our daily lives, and something we deeply desire to protect. Steps like these, this induction burner, they're a really fun way to get involved in acting on climate change to protect those members of our family. But I think this is especially fun, especially for me as a renter who doesn't have the power to permanently alter her home. It's fun because it gets me started and it gets me involved in the movement, in the climate movement. Now, movement, it's all about collective action, and actually that collective action is the most powerful thing that we have when it comes to fighting climate change. So all of us coming together and using our voices to urge our decision makers, like our elected officials, like our local representatives, to mandate climate action through laws, policies, and regulations, and to do so right now. Did you know that there's just 100 corporations responsible for over 70% of carbon pollution since 1980? Just 100. And they're actually terrified of the power that we have when we come together to institute change at a community level, at a local level, and at a state level. So much so that they try to distract us with things like a personal carbon footprint, so we focus more on our day-to-day lives and less on their corrupt, polluting practices. So as you eat this dish, if you try it, I hope you try it. It's really fun. I hope that it reminds you of family, the way that it reminds me of family. And I hope that it reminds you of community, and that when we all come together and when we all act together, that's when we make the biggest change, and that's when we truly have a chance to fight a crisis as big as climate change. So I hope you try this dish. Thanks for joining me, and bon appetit. Welcome back. Hello, it's me again. Is anyone hungry? Well, okay, I know I am hungry for some questions. So let's take a look at the questions that we've submitted so far, that we've had submitted so far. And we're gonna answer everything that's on your mind and everything that's popped up so far. So the first question we have from Sharon: will anything positive ever happen on the energy front at the national level? Or should we continue to put our support into regional organizations like CLF? Emily, do you want to take a crack at that question?
Yeah, sure. I can take a first stab. Absolutely. I think that the climate crisis is an all hands on deck crisis. And that means that we're going to need to keep fighting at the national level. We've got to keep fighting at the regional level, at the state level, even at the municipal level, like Jackson was telling us about earlier. So I wouldn't give up on the federal government. I think there are already some really important things actually under consideration right now. But that doesn't mean that we should ease up pressure on our state governments.
Great. Thank you, Emily. And Jackson, I'm curious to hear what you have to say, working at a local level.
Yeah, I mean, I really totally agree with all of that sentiment. I think that, it is an all hands on deck situation, and we need people acting it from a local level all the way up to the federal level. There have been some positive changes coming out of the federal government. I mean, the infrastructure package that's coming down the pipeline will be a big help to local partners and states to help implement initiatives to fight climate change. So I see a positive future, but I absolutely agree that it takes sparking change all the way from your town up to the federal level.
Excellent. Great. Well, we have a question from Monty. What do you project regarding prices of natural gas and electricity over the upcoming 20 years? Greg, do you want to take a crack at that question? Brief pause.
My apologies. You'd think with all this Zoom meeting, I'd have my mute button down by now. What I would say is that, I can only predict that it will be inherently unpredictable. And, it is very likely that the prices will rise. It is very likely that there will be efforts to export gas from this country, which will limit supply in this country, which will drive up the cost. But the real issue with gas is not only its volatility as a fuel, but its volatility in price and the effects that it has on the economy as a result. It is, whether it's as a result of unfortunate wars, as we have in Ukraine now, or as a result of storms such as we had in Texas, whether it's as a result of other geopolitical country-to-country turmoil, gas is always fluctuating, and we always pay the price.
Thank you, Greg. Does anyone else want to add on to that? Very well answered. Well, moving right along, we have a question from Adam. What are you doing, or what should I be doing to move the discussion away from the hydrogen in the methane system narrative being provided by utilities? This is a really great question and a really timely question, especially in Massachusetts right now, but across New England. Emily, do you want to take a crack at this one?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I think that hydrogen, as well as other solutions that are being advanced typically by fossil fuel companies like so-called renewable gas, are not actually a large-scale climate solution. Perhaps they do have a limited finite role, but the role is being overplayed by the fossil fuel industry. So these are limited resources. They tend to be very costly, and they also tend to involve burning and leaking fossil fuels. So they cause some of the same problems that they are supposedly going to be displacing. In short, we already know what are the key solutions that we need to be focusing on right now, and that is, in a word, electrification and electricity for powering our homes, for heating our homes, for powering our cars, and we need to be focusing on renewable power sources.
Excellent. Super helpful, Emily. Does anyone want to add anything onto that?
I'd be happy to.
Greg,
Emily is right on. The only thing I would add is that perhaps as concerning as anything is that gas utilities are using these kinds of alternatives like hydrogen and renewable natural gas as a justification for continuing with business as usual. They're urging that they should be able to continue to build out their pipelines, that we as consumers should pay for their build out of additional pipelines, and that nothing really should change because they have this supply, which, as Emily has pointed out, they don't and won't and can't, of alternative fuels that they'll fill these pipelines with. It's really it's a fallacy, and they're trying to convince our policymakers to go along with it, and we're in there fighting them tooth and nail.
Absolutely, Greg. And I think especially important that something Emily said is not just focusing on rebutting, saying, no, this is wrong, but at the same time, hammering in that the solution is electrification. It is clean energy. Our future isn't a future of fossil fuels. Our future is a clean energy future. And that's half of our work, in addition to the other half saying, no, this is not right. So very well said. Thank you so much, Greg and Emily, for answering that. We have a question from Sarah. How important is the governor's race going to be in New Hampshire since the state is falling behind on climate action? I don't know who to toss this to. Who wants to take a gander at this question? Should I toss it to you,
Go
Jen?
ahead and give it a shot. Sure.
Great.
Why not? So I agree. There is concern that what's being done in New Hampshire is not nearly enough if you compare it to our surrounding New England states. And I think it will likely be important to some aspects. I mean, there's been a lot of push from like the Consumer Advocate's Office and from municipal towns to make more change in New Hampshire, because we are very much lagging behind. And one of the arguments that we consistently are trying to put forward is that, we're the only state in New England who's continually having our electricity increase per capita, where in every other state in New England is actually improving. And that will just increase costs for your everyday ratepayers. So I think when it comes down to the economics of it, there's going to have to be some change made here. And I'm hoping to see that sooner rather than later. So I think you're right to look to the governor's race as being important, and definitely speak out for the issues that you want to be heard and you want action to be conducted upon.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jackson. We have another question from Carol. What are some other success stories in New England happening right now regarding transitioning off of fossil fuels? Greg, do you want to take a crack at this one?
I'm happy to, and Emily could as well. I would hearken back to what's happening in my home state, which is that we are leading New England in the installation of heat pumps. These are electric sources of electricity. They are clean, they are affordable, and Maine has, in the last 7 to 8 years, developed programs that are making these accessible to all Mainers. And as a result, we have more in Maine than in any other state. In England, we have programs that are more robust than any state, and they've really proven to be it's proven to be a essentially for our other states to follow.
You want to add to that?
Absolutely. Greg stole the success story I was going to highlight. Such a good one. But our electric car story in Maine is also worth highlighting. We started out with basically no electric cars on the roads, but the state has made a real commitment to investing in electric vehicles and in getting them in the hands of all sorts of Mainers. And, car prices are dropping. The state is providing rebates. The state is providing charger rebates and really investing in getting EV charging all around the state so that you can drive and feel comfortable driving. And we are making a lot of progress really fast. And one other thing I would highlight, so that we're not only focusing on the northernmost part of the region, is just this week in Connecticut, the state public utilities regulator actually just released a draft decision that would stop a program that was investing in home gas expansion. So this is exactly the sort of systemic level, statewide level policy making change that we really need to be focusing on to move away from fossil fuels in our homes.
How inspiring. Yes, I'm so glad you highlighted this recent potential win in Connecticut. We're going to wait for a final decision at the end of April. Jackson, are there any other success stories in Dover that you wanted to touch on that you didn't get a chance to yet?
Sure. So the Energy Commission just released its 2022 Energy Commission report, which is really exciting. That will be distributed to the City Council very shortly. And I'm excited about it because it lays out a lot of great initiatives that we're trying to accomplish. We're looking to expand municipal solar to 2 of our highest energy consuming facilities, those being the ice arena and the wastewater treatment plant. So I'd love to see solar installations come there. One thing that we recently did is purchase 2 more EVs for our municipal fleet. And I just completed an RFP process, or a request for proposal process, to select a vendor to install some dual port charging systems for those EVs. So that's something that was recently happened that I thought was awesome. And, there's a lot coming down the pipeline here in Dover. Not the pipeline, I should say. The electric transmission wire.
Perfect. Good catch. Amazing. I love hearing all these success stories and hearing the inspiration and positivity that comes from them. Because like you said, Emily, a lot of what we hear in the media is just, it's really saddening, and it's really hard to feel like we can make a difference. So I love hearing how we can make a difference. We have a question from Katie. Does CLF have any publicly accessible resources for getting started with taking community action? I might jump in on this one and give you a little quick answer. The first is sign up for our e-news. You can sign up at our website, clf.org. We will literally send you opportunities where you can take action at the community level, depending where you live. These are called action alerts, and they happen when we need public comments. They happen when we need people to contact their legislator about a bill or a policy. So definitely sign up if you want to start taking community action. That's a really amazing way. We also have a climate action toolkit somewhere on our website. I'm hoping that our digital master Romo can find it, but no pressure if he can't, on how to contact your elected officials and some like cheat sheet tips and tricks on ways to get started. Does anyone else want to add anything about publicly accessible resources? Okay, moral of the story, sign up for our e-news. We have a question from Janet. Do you see any role for fusion energy? Greg, do you want to take that one?
I'm happy to. So the role of fusion energy, which is a form of nuclear energy in which atoms are fused as opposed to split, is, this is one of the nuclear technologies that has been in development now for over a decade, and it shows real promise. It is, as we understand it, still some years away. There are several projects that are currently proposed. There is substantial funding in Congress's most recent infrastructure package for fusion and nuclear energy. And so we are hopeful that there will be developments with this technology that could really serve a critical role of clean 24/7 energy. It is one of these that we're tracking, and there is uncertainty around it. It's really important that the kind of research and development funding that we got from Congress continue to flow to these kinds of industry and battery technology example, where we're making advancements on a daily basis, but the funding is so essential, and some of this R&D is so costly. So we're tracking it, and I think there's real hope for it.
Excellent. Does anyone else want to add to that? Okay, well, we have time for one more question. It comes from a very familiar name, Mala. That's my mother. Hi. Who asks, traditionally, electricity is considered much more expensive to a homeowner than gas. Will this possibly change with your recommendation for clean energy? This is an excellent question. And Jackson, you have proof of concept, so I'm going to toss it over to you. What do you think?
Yeah, solar panels show great success in terms of financing. The biggest barrier is really that upfront financing, but these projects pay themselves back, depending on the scale, within 5 to 10 years. And then you're reaping the benefits of saving money over the course of the lifetime of those panels, which could be as much as 40 years. So, I'd say if you're looking to invest in solar, look for opportunities. In your state, there's usually some large rebates that are available that can help make them a little less expensive. And once they're installed, you will absolutely save money in the long term.
Great. Emily, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, there are a few things that I would add additionally. One thing is that the more diverse our energy portfolio is, so in other words, the more diverse resources by which we are generating electricity, the less volatile our electricity prices will be. So yes, investment in renewables, in large-scale renewables, in batteries, in solar panels on the roofs, etc. The more that we diversify, the less volatile our electricity prices will be. Another point I would just make when it comes to heating our homes with air source heat pumps is that we're talking about highly efficient technologies that use less energy and therefore lead to cost savings. And then a third point I would just make is that widespread electrification, both of our cars and our trucks, but also of our heating, really can lead to efficiencies in the way the electricity grid runs. And there's actual real promise for driving electricity costs down by electrifying and by the resources that come with that widespread electrification.
Great. Thanks, Emily. So there's not only promise, but there's actual proof in the work that's being done in Dover, for example. Thank you all so much for your questions. Unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for today. So I really hoped that you all enjoyed sparking this conversation with us about electrification, about our clean energy future. A very special thanks to Greg, Emily, and Jackson for joining us today and for all of your awesome words and inspiring words. And thank you to all of you watching for participating, asking amazing questions, and listening to this great conversation. I want to say that this conversation doesn't end here at 6:30 p.m. or almost 6:30 p.m. on a Thursday night. I encourage you to keep up with the conversation by staying informed on everything that CLF is doing regarding clean energy and climate change, including opportunities for action, by signing up for our e-news, which is clf.org, and also following us on all of our social media platforms. Better yet, you can take what you learned tonight and tell your friends, your family members, keep that conversation going with your networks. And if you have the capacity to fund our work, you can do so by clicking the link in the chat to donate. I want to leave you all with one last thing tonight that I don't want you to forget, and that is, this is our collective climate fight. And your voice is one of the most important things that you have when it comes to tackling the climate crisis. Even better, our voices together are unimaginably powerful. So make sure people hear it, that people hear your voice and what you care about. Tell your legislators, tell your representatives, tell your elected officials why we should act on climate and why we should do so now. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Once again, I'm Rishya. From my home to yours, I'm thrilled to make this clean energy future a reality with you. I hope you enjoy the night.